The words cut across the firing range like a blade. Go play with dolls, sweetheart. This is work for real warriors. Gunnery Sergeant Declan Forsyth said it loud enough for every Marine within 50 meters to hear, and a few of them laughed. The woman behind the rifle did not react, did not flinch, did not even appear to register that anyone had spoken. Chief Petty Officer Ramona Okafor simply adjusted her breathing, felt the rhythm of her heartbeat, and placed 5 rounds through the same hole at 800 meters. The laughter stopped. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from today. Maybe you have seen someone underestimated the way Ramona was about to be. The morning sun over Camp Lemonnier cast long shadows across the joint training compound, and the heat was already oppressive even at 0700. Ramona pulled back from her scope and began clearing her rifle with movements so practiced they required no conscious thought. She had been shooting since she was 11 years old, had qualified expert in every weapon system the Navy offered, and held 3 records that still stood at the SEAL Sniper School in Indiana. None of that mattered to men like Forsyth. It never did. Her spotter, Petty Officer Second Class Dante Quillian, appeared beside her with 2 bottles of water. He was 5 years younger than her, Louisiana-born with a quick tongue and quicker reflexes, and he had been watching the exchange with barely contained fury. You want me to say something to that jarhead, Chief? Because I have words. Lots of words. Most of them creative. Ramona took the water without looking at him. Save your creativity for calling wind. We have work to do. Across the range, Forsyth was holding court with a cluster of Marines from Force Reconnaissance. They were all part of the joint task force that had been assembled 3 days ago, SEALs and Marines working together for a high-value extraction that Command said could not wait. Ramona had seen the intelligence briefings. An American epidemiologist named Dr. Miriam Castellanos had been taken hostage by militants in Somalia, and she was running out of time. The mission required precision. It required professionals. It required people who could put aside their egos and function as a unit. Looking at Forsyth, Ramona wondered if that was possible. A young Marine approached the firing line, struggling with a jam in his M4. He was new, probably 19 at most, and his frustration was visible in the set of his shoulders. Ramona watched him yank at the charging handle twice before she set down her rifle and walked over. "Stop fighting it," she said. "You're making it worse." The young Marine looked up, startled. His eyes went to the seal trident on her chest, then to her face, and she saw the confusion there. She was used to it. Female SEALs were still rare enough to be remarkable, and some men never got past the initial surprise. "Here." Ramona took the rifle from his hands, her movements calm and unhurried. "You have a double feed, probably from a damaged magazine." She stripped the magazine, locked the bolt back, and cleared the chamber with 2 economical motions. Then she inspected the magazine itself, found the dented feed lip, and handed both pieces back to him. "Get a new magazine from supply. This one will keep jamming until you do." The Marine stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Chief." She returned to her position without another word, but she felt Forsyth watching her. When she glanced in his direction, his sneer had not wavered. "Anyone can clear a jam," he called out. "Let us see if she can perform when lives are on the line instead of paper targets." Dante muttered something under his breath that Ramona chose not to hear. She had learned long ago that responding to men like Forsyth only fed their appetite for confrontation. The mission would speak for itself. It always did. That evening, after the formal briefings had concluded and most of the task force had scattered to the chow hall or their racks, Ramona sat alone in the empty range facility. Her rifle was disassembled on the table before her, each component cleaned and inspected with ritualistic precision. In her pocket, she carried a photograph she never showed anyone. A man in desert camouflage, smiling at the camera, his arm around her shoulders. The edges of the photo were worn soft from handling. Krieger. 3 years since Yemen. 3 years since the shot she did not take. Her hand drifted to the thin scar along her jawline, a souvenir from a training accident that had nothing to do with the memory that haunted her. She had been offered a position at Warcom 6 months ago, training the next generation of snipers. She had turned it down without explanation. Some things you could not teach. Some things you could not forgive. Chief Okafor. The voice belonged to Master Chief Wendell Achebe, the senior enlisted advisor overseeing the joint operation. He was Nigerian-American like her father had been, with gray at his temples and eyes that missed nothing. "May I sit?" She gestured to the empty chair across from her. Achebe settled into it with the careful movements of a man whose knees had seen too many jumps. "I knew your father," he said. "Served with him briefly before he retired. Good man. Good sailor." Ramona said nothing. "I have also heard the rumors," Achebe continued, "about Yemen, about why you turned down the instructor position." He paused. "Are you certain you are ready for this mission?" She met his eyes for the first time. The question was fair. The answer was the only one she had. "I have to be, Master Chief. There is no other option." Achebe studied her for a long moment, and whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. He rose, placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, and walked toward the door. Then he stopped. "Whatever happened over there," he said without turning around, "it does not define you. What you do next does." He left her alone with her rifle and her ghosts. Outside, the African night had fallen like a curtain, and somewhere in the darkness, a mission was waiting that would test everything she had. Ramona began reassembling her weapon, each piece sliding into place with familiar certainty. In 48 hours, she would find out if she was still the sniper she had once been, or if Forsyth was right, and she would shatter like glass when it mattered most. The briefing room fell silent as Colonel Hadwick activated the satellite imagery on the main screen. The compound materialized in grainy detail, a collection of low buildings nestled in a valley surrounded by jagged ridgelines. "This is the target," the colonel said. "Militant stronghold in the Puntland region of Somalia. Dr. Miriam Castellanos has been held here for 11 days. Intelligence suggests we have 72 hours before they move her to a secondary location where extraction becomes functionally impossible." Ramona studied the terrain with the eye of someone who had spent years reading landscapes for threat and opportunity. The valley was a natural kill zone, with limited approach vectors and excellent defensive positions on high ground. Whoever had chosen this location knew what they were doing. Forsyth stood near the front of the room, arms crossed, his Force Recon Marines clustered behind him like a wall of muscle and skepticism. Lieutenant Commander Tobias Nystrom, Ramona's team leader, occupied the opposite side with the SEAL element. The division was subtle but unmistakable. Two tribes forced into temporary alliance. "Sniper overwatch will be critical," Colonel Hadwick continued. "We have confirmed at least 2 enemy marksmen positioned on the eastern ridge. They will need to be neutralized before ground teams can approach." Forsyth's voice cut through the room. "And who exactly is handling that neutralization?" "Chief Okafor and Petty Officer Quillian," Nystrom answered before the colonel could respond. "They will establish overwatch position here." He pointed to a spot on the map, a rocky outcropping 1,400 meters from the compound. From there, they can cover both the enemy sniper positions and provide fire support during extraction. Forsyth made a sound that was not quite a laugh. 1,400 meters is a long shot. Some might say too long for someone who has never been tested in a situation like this. Ramona felt Dante tense beside her, but she kept her expression neutral. "Chief Okafor holds the current record for longest confirmed kill in naval special warfare training," Nystrom said, his Swedish accent becoming more pronounced the way it always did when he was irritated. "I trust her capabilities completely." "Training is not combat," Forsyth replied. "Paper targets do not shoot back. They do not move. They do not make your hands shake when you know a life depends on your trigger pull." He looked directly at Ramona. "Can you perform when it actually matters, Chief? Or will you freeze up like you did in Yemen?" The room went cold. Ramona heard Dante's sharp intake of breath, felt the weight of every eye turning toward her. The Yemen rumor had followed her for 3 years, whispered in corridors and debated in after-action reviews. She had never confirmed or denied it. She had never explained. "Gunnery Sergeant," Colonel Hadwick said, his tone carrying warning. "That is enough." Forsyth held up his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes never left Ramona's face. Just asking the questions everyone else is thinking, sir. We are trusting our lives to her aim. Seems reasonable to know if she can handle the pressure. Ramona rose from her seat. The movement was unhurried, almost casual, and the room fell silent again. She walked to the front, past Forsyth, and stopped before the tactical display. Then she began to speak. I qualified expert on the M4 at age 19. I completed SEAL Sniper School with the highest marks in my class. I hold certifications in 7 precision rifle platforms and have logged over 4,000 hours of operational sniper time across 3 deployments. Her voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. I have made confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,600 meters in conditions including sandstorms, monsoon rain, and near-zero visibility. My spotter and I have provided overwatch for 23 successful extractions without a single friendly casualty. She turned to face Forsyth directly. Those are my qualifications, Gunnery Sergeant. I understand you have concerns about my abilities. I suggest you set them aside and focus on your own responsibilities. Because in 48 hours, your Marines will be relying on my rifle to keep them alive. And I do not intend to let them down. The silence that followed was absolute. Forsyth's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. After a moment, Colonel Hadwick cleared his throat and continued the briefing. Later that afternoon, the Joint Task Force conducted a live-fire training exercise in the scrubland east of the base. The scenario was straightforward. Alpha Team, led by Forsyth, would assault a mock compound while Bravo Team provided sniper, overwatch, and fire support. Simple in theory. In practice, everything went wrong. Ramona had established her position on a small rise with clear sight lines to the target area. Dante was beside her, calling wind speeds and distances with practiced efficiency. The exercise began well enough, with Alpha Team advancing in textbook formation. Then Forsyth's Marines began drifting into her firing lanes. It started subtly, one fire team moving slightly left of their assigned corridor. Then another shifted right, directly into the path she would need to engage the simulated enemy positions. Every time she acquired target, a Marine body stepped into her line of fire, forcing her to abort the shot. Dante cursed under his breath. They're doing this on purpose. Ramona knew he was right. She also knew that complaining would only confirm Forsyth's narrative about her inability to perform under pressure. So she adapted. She shifted position, found new angles, called adjustments to Nystrom over the radio. When Alpha Team finally reached the objective, every simulated enemy had been neutralized despite the interference. Forsyth found her as she was packing her gear. Interesting performance, he said. Noticed a lot of hesitation out there. A lot of aborted shots. I noticed a lot of Marines who cannot maintain their lanes. Ramona replied, without looking up. Might want to work on that before the real thing. His smile did not reach his eyes. We will see who needs to work on what, Chief. He walked away, and Ramona watched him go. Beside her, Dante shook his head. That man has a death wish. One of these days someone is going to give him what he is asking for. Not today, Ramona said. And not from me. Focus on the mission. But even as she said the words, she felt the familiar tremor in her hands. The one that came whenever someone mentioned Yemen. The one that reminded her of a shot not taken and a friend who had paid the price. Staff Sergeant Yuki Brennan appeared at the edge of the training area, watching Ramona with an expression that was difficult to read. She was the only other woman in the task force, a Marine with a reputation for competence and a demeanor that discouraged casual conversation. She had not spoken a word to Ramona since the operation began. Now she approached, her stride purposeful. I do not know what you are trying to prove out here, she said. But whatever personal crusade you are on, do not let it get my Marines killed. Ramona met her gaze. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to bring everyone home. Brennan's expression flickered, something passing behind her eyes that might have been doubt or might have been recognition. That is what they all say, she replied. Until they freeze. The word hung in the air between them. Freeze. The same accusation from a different mouth. Brennan turned to leave, then paused. The rumors about Yemen, she said without looking back. Are they true? Ramona did not answer. She did not have to. Her silence spoke volumes, and Brennan nodded once before walking away into the gathering dusk. The range was empty at 0300, which was exactly why Ramona had chosen this hour. The African darkness wrapped around her like a familiar blanket as she settled behind her rifle, the night vision scope painting the world in shades of green. She had not been able to sleep. The dreams had come again, the ones where Krieger was still alive and asking her why she had not pulled the trigger. She fired. The round struck center mass on the target 800 meters downrange. She chambered another round and fired again. And again. The rhythm was meditative, each shot a small exorcism of the ghost that refused to stay buried. A figure emerged from the darkness, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there. Lieutenant Commander Nystrom settled into the spotter position without a word, pressing his eye to the spotting scope. He did not ask why she was here or what she was running from. He simply began calling adjustments. Wind shifting southeast, 2 minutes. Target 1,200 meters. Ramona adjusted and fired. The distant ping of metal confirmed the hit. They worked in silence for nearly an hour, pushing the distances longer, the shots more difficult. Nystrom had been an Olympic biathlete before joining the Navy, and he understood the meditative quality of precision shooting in a way few others did. He also understood when someone needed to work through something without the burden of conversation. Finally, as the first hints of gray began to lighten the eastern horizon, he spoke. Forsyth has been talking to people, spreading the Yemen story to anyone who will listen. Ramona kept her eye pressed to the scope. Let him talk. It is affecting the team. The Marines are looking at you differently. Even some of our people are starting to wonder. She pulled back from the rifle and looked at him directly. Do you wonder? Nystrom held her gaze for a long moment. I know what happened in Yemen, he said quietly. I read the after-action report. I know about Krieger, and I know about the shot you did not take. What I also know is that you have performed flawlessly on every operation since then. Whatever happened that day, it does not define your capabilities. Ramona felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had not realized she was carrying. She nodded once, and Nystrom returned to the spotting scope as if the conversation had never happened. That was why she trusted him. He said what needed to be said, then let it go. The day brought new complications. During the morning equipment check, Ramona discovered that her rifle scope had been tampered with. The zero was off by nearly 3 minutes of angle, enough to cause a miss at any distance beyond 400 meters. Subtle enough that she might not have noticed until it was too late. Dante found her recalibrating the scope in the armory, his face tight with anger. Someone did this on purpose. Someone on this base tried to sabotage your weapon. Ramona did not look up from her work. I know. We need to report this. Dante's voice was rising. This is not just harassment anymore. This could have gotten people killed. And what would reporting accomplish? Ramona asked calmly. We have no proof of who did it. Forsyth would deny any involvement. And even if he was responsible, we cannot prove it. All we would do is create more division in a task force that is already fractured. So we just let it go. Let whoever did this get away with it. We fix the problem, and we stay vigilant. Ramona finally looked up, meeting his eyes. The mission is in 36 hours. Dr. Castellanos does not have time for us to chase down saboteurs. We do our job, we bring everyone home, and we let our performance speak for itself. Dante stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. You are a better person than I am, Chief, because if I found out who did this, I would break their hands. The afternoon briefing brought unwelcome news. Intelligence had been updated with new satellite imagery, and the situation at the target compound had deteriorated. The enemy sniper positions on the eastern ridge were more fortified than initially believed, and there were now confirmed to be at least 4 additional fighters in the compound itself. Colonel Hadwick laid out the revised threat assessment with grim efficiency. The approach vectors remain the same, but we are now looking at a significantly harder target. Overwatch will be even more critical. Chief Okafor, the enemy snipers need to be eliminated before Alpha Team can advance. Without that, the assault cannot proceed. Forsyth leaned forward. And what if our Overwatch cannot deliver? What is the contingency? There is no contingency, Nystrom said flatly. If the enemy snipers are not neutralized, the mission fails. Doctor Castellanos dice. The room absorbed this in silence. Ramona felt the weight of every eye on her, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Could she deliver when it mattered most? Forsyth smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. That is a lot of pressure, Chief. Whole mission riding on your shoulders. Hope you can handle it better than you handled Yemen. Ramona's response was quiet but clear. The enemy snipers will be eliminated, Gunnery Sergeant. You focus on getting your Marines to the objective. I will handle the rest. The briefing concluded with final coordination details, and the task force began dispersing to prepare their equipment for the next day's insertion. Ramona was gathering her notes when Brennan intercepted her at the door. The Marine's expression was unreadable. I heard about your scope. Word travels fast on a base this size. Ramona waited. Brennan glanced around to ensure they were not overheard, then lowered her voice. It was not Forsyth. He is a lot of things, but he would not sabotage equipment. Not when his own Marines are counting on your overwatch. Then who? I do not know, but I'm looking into it. Brennan paused, something shifting in her demeanor. I still have concerns about your ability to perform under pressure. The Yemen rumors are hard to ignore, but I will not let someone undermine this mission through sabotage. That crosses a line. Before Ramona could respond, Brennan was gone, disappearing into the bustle of personnel preparing for war. That night, Ramona sat alone in her quarters, cleaning her rifle for the third time. The weapon was already immaculate, but the ritual soothed her in ways she could not explain. Tomorrow they would fly into hostile territory. Tomorrow she would face enemy snipers who wanted to kill her and allies who doubted her. Tomorrow, everything she had worked for would be tested. Her hand found a photograph in her pocket. Krieger's smile looked up at her, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. I will not hesitate this time, she whispered to the empty room. I promise. The intelligence update arrived at 2200 hours, delivered by a grim-faced analyst who clearly wished he had better news. Ramona read the report twice, her stomach sinking with each word. The enemy snipers on the ridge were not ordinary fighters. Analysis of their equipment and positioning suggested professional training, possibly former military from a hostile nation-state. One of them was using an American-made rifle, either captured, purchased on a black market, or supplied by someone who should not have access to such weapons. These were not amateurs. They were killers who knew their craft. And in less than 18 hours, Ramona would have to be better. Ramona spread the intelligence photographs across the table in the Tactical Operations Center, studying the enemy sniper positions with the focus of a surgeon examining scans before a difficult procedure. The two figures on the eastern ridge had chosen their location well. Overlapping fields of fire, natural cover from aerial observation, and clear sight lines to every approach vector the assault team would need to use. Whoever these men were, they understood their craft. Dante leaned over her shoulder, pointing to the closer of the two positions. This one is using a Dragunov. Russian-made, effective out to about 800 meters in trained hands. But the other one is the problem, Ramona finished. The grainy image showed a prone figure behind what appeared to be an M110 semi-automatic sniper system. American military issue, capable of accurate fire well beyond 1,000 meters. Either captured from a fallen soldier, purchased through illegal channels, or supplied by someone with access to United States military hardware. Master Chief Achebe entered the TOC, his expression carrying the weight of information he would rather not share. He waited until the door closed behind him before speaking. I have been making inquiries about your equipment situation, Chief. Quietly, Ramona looked up. And? The sabotage to your scope was sophisticated. Whoever did it knew exactly how much adjustment would cause a miss without being immediately obvious. That is not the work of an amateur with a grudge. That is someone with technical knowledge of precision optics. Dante's jaw tightened. So we are looking for a trained sniper or armorer. That narrows it down to about half the people on this base. Achebe shook his head. I have ruled out Forsyth and his immediate circle. Whatever else he may be, the gunnery sergeant would not compromise a mission that puts his own Marines at risk. His hatred for female operators is personal, but it is not suicidal. Then who? Ramona asked. I do not know yet, but I am continuing to investigate. In the meantime, I suggest you maintain personal control of your equipment at all times. Trust no one outside your immediate team. After Achebe left, Dante pulled a chair close and sat down heavily. This is getting out of hand, Chief. Bad enough we have enemy snipers waiting for us. Now we have to watch our backs on our own base. Ramona did not answer immediately. She was thinking about Forsyth, about the intensity of his hatred and the specificity of his attacks. There was something personal driving him, something beyond simple prejudice against women in combat roles. She had seen that kind of focused animosity before. It always had a source. She found Achebe in the corridor outside the communications center. Master Chief, I need to ask you something about Forsyth. His hostility toward me feels targeted. Personal. Do you know why? Achebe's expression shifted, something like sympathy crossing his weathered features. He guided her to a quiet alcove away from the foot traffic and lowered his voice. 3 years ago, Gunnery Sergeant Forsyth had a younger sister, Elena. She was a Marine infantry, trying to make her way in a world that was not always welcoming to women in combat roles. Ramona felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. What happened to her? Training accident. She was killed during a live-fire exercise when a vehicle rolled over on unstable terrain. The investigation concluded it was equipment failure combined with environmental factors. But Forsyth did not accept that conclusion. He blamed someone. He blamed the policies that he believes put unqualified people in positions they had not earned. Achebe met her eyes directly. He believes his sister died because standards were lowered to meet diversity quotas. He believes the woman driving that vehicle should never have been there. And he has spent the last 3 years making sure no other woman succeeds in special operations, if he can help it. Ramona absorbed this in silence. The revelation did not excuse Forsyth's behavior, but it explained the depth of his hatred. He was not simply a bigot clinging to outdated beliefs. He was a grieving brother who had channeled his pain into a crusade against everyone who reminded him of his loss. That does not make it right, she said finally. No, Achebe agreed. It does not, but it might help you understand what you're dealing with, and perhaps find a way through it that does not destroy you both. The final mission briefing convened at 1600 hours. Colonel Hadwick walked the assembled operators through every phase of the operation, from helicopter insertion to extraction protocols. The timeline was tight. Launch at 0200, approach the target area under cover of darkness. Establish overwatch by 0430. Begin the assault at first light. Ramona listened with half her attention while the other half worked through the tactical problem of the enemy snipers. 1600 meters was the estimated range to their positions from her planned overwatch point, well within her capabilities under normal conditions. But these would not be normal conditions. She would be shooting in low light, across unfamiliar terrain, at trained opponents who would be actively trying to kill her. And somewhere in the back of her mind, the ghost of Yemen whispered that she had failed before, that she might fail again. Forsyth caught her eye across the briefing room. For once, there was no sneer on his face, no mockery in his expression. He simply looked at her with something that might have been assessment, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Then the moment passed, and he returned his attention to the colonel's briefing. After the briefing concluded, Ramona found a quiet corner to check her equipment one final time. Her rifle was secure, the scope properly zeroed after her recalibration. Her ammunition was sorted and counted. Her ghillie suit modifications were complete. Everything was ready. Everything except her hands, which had developed a barely perceptible tremor. Dante appeared beside her, his own equipment squared away. He did not comment on the trembling. He simply sat down and began field stripping his sidearm, providing company without demanding conversation. After several minutes of silence, Ramona spoke. There was a shot I did not take. In Yemen, 3 years ago. Dante's hand stilled, but he did not look up. We were extracting a wounded operator. My teammate Krieger was moving to cover him. I had eyes on an enemy fighter who was flanking their position. I had the shot. Clear line of fire, solid hold, finger on the trigger. She paused, the memory playing behind her eyes like a film she could not stop. There was a child, a boy maybe 8 years old. He was near the target, not in my line of fire, but close. Close enough that I hesitated. Dante waited. 1 second. That is all it was. 1 second of hesitation while I recalculated, made sure the geometry was right. And in that second, the fighter killed Krieger. I took the shot immediately after, dropped the target clean. The child was never in danger. My original calculation was correct. But by then it did not matter. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of confession. Finally, Dante spoke. You made a human choice, Chief. You saw a kid, and you made sure you would not hurt him. That is not weakness. That is conscience. Ramona shook her head. Tell that to Krieger. Dante reached over and placed his hand on her forearm, stilling the tremor she had not realized was visible. I cannot tell Krieger anything, but I can tell you this. Tomorrow, when it matters, you will take the shot, because that is who you are. 1 moment of hesitation does not erase everything else you have done. It does not define you. She looked at him, this young man from Louisiana who had followed her into hell more times than either of them could count. And who do you think I am? Dante smiled, the expression carrying warmth despite the tension of the moment. You are Phantom, the best sniper I have ever worked with. And tomorrow, you're going to prove it to everyone, including yourself. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Camp Lemonnier, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In less than 10 hours, they would be airborne. In less than 12, she would face the test that had been waiting for her since Yemen. This time, she would not hesitate. The MH-60 Black Hawk thundered through the pre-dawn darkness, its rotors beating a rhythm that Ramona felt in her chest. She sat with her back against the fuselage, rifle secure between her knees, watching the dim shapes of her teammates through the green glow of the cabin lighting. Dante was beside her, his lips moving silently as he ran through calculations in his head. Nystrom sat across from them, his eyes closed but clearly not sleeping. The SEALs of Bravo team were quiet, each man lost in the private rituals that preceded combat. In the second helicopter, Forsyth and his Marines were making their own preparations. Whatever hostility existed between the two elements, it would have to wait. For the next several hours, they were one unit with one purpose. Dr. Miriam Castellanos was running out of time, and failure was not an option. The crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes to the landing zone. Ramona performed one final check of her equipment. Rifle secure. Ammunition accessible. Communications gear functional. Ghillie suit packed for quick deployment once they reached the overwatch position. Everything was ready. Everything except the knot of tension in her stomach that had been tightening since they lifted off from Camp Lemonnier. The helicopter flared and touched down in a cloud of dust. Bravo team was moving before the skids fully settled, pouring out into the darkness with practiced efficiency. Ramona and Dante broke left, heading for the ridgeline that would become their home for the next several hours. Behind them, Alpha Team's helicopter was disgorging Forsyth's Marines into the opposite tree-line. The approach to the overwatch position took 40 minutes of careful movement through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and tear equipment. Ramona led the way, her night vision painting the rocks and scrub brush in shades of gray and green. Dante followed 3 meters behind, covering their rear and watching for any sign that their insertion had been detected. They reached the designated position as the first hints of gray began to lighten the eastern horizon. The rocky outcropping provided excellent concealment and clear sight lines to the target compound below. Ramona settled into a prone position, deploying her rifle and beginning the process of ranging the key terrain features she would need to reference during the operation. Dante set up beside her, his spotting scope already trained on the enemy sniper positions. I have eyes on the eastern ridge. 2 figures, both in position. The one with the Dragunov is closer, maybe 1,400 meters. The M110 shooter is further back, looks like 1,600 plus. Ramona found them through her own scope. The Dragunov shooter was partially concealed behind a rock formation, but she could see enough of his silhouette to take the shot when the time came. The second sniper was more problematic. His position was deeper in the shadows, and he had chosen his cover well. Taking him out would require patience and precision. Alpha Team in position. Forsyth's voice crackled over the radio. Holding for green light. Bravo overwatch established. Nystrom responded from his position with the support element. Phantom, status? Ramona keyed her microphone. I have eyes on both enemy snipers. Ready to engage on command. The minutes stretched like hours as they waited for full dawn. The plan called for Ramona to eliminate the enemy snipers at first light, creating a window for Alpha Team to advance on the compound. Once the assault began, she would shift to providing precision fire support, eliminating any threats that emerged during the extraction. It was a good plan. Simple, direct, with clear objectives and defined roles. The kind of plan that worked flawlessly in training scenarios and fell apart the moment it encountered reality. The sun crested the horizon, spilling golden light across the valley. Ramona settled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow as she entered the focused state that preceded a shot. The Dragunov shooter was her first target. 1,400 meters. Wind from the southwest at 8 miles per hour. Elevation differential of approximately 200 feet downward. She made the calculations automatically, adjusting her aim point with microscopic precision. Phantom, you're cleared hot, Nystrom's voice said in her ear. She exhaled slowly, her finger tightening on the trigger. The crosshairs settled on the enemy sniper's center mass. One shot, one kill, just like training. The image of a child flashed through her mind. A boy in Yemen, standing too close to a target. The hesitation that had cost Krieger his life. Not now. Not this time. She fired. The round crossed the 1,400 meters in just under 2 seconds. The Dragunov shooter jerked once and went still. Ramona was already shifting to the second target before the echo of her shot faded. But the M110 shooter was faster than she expected. He had heard the shot, seen his partner fall, and was already moving. His rifle swung toward her position, and she realized with cold clarity that he had somehow identified her location. Contact, she said into the radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Second sniper is mobile and aware. A round cracked past her head, close enough that she felt the displaced air against her cheek. Dante cursed and pressed himself flatter against the rock. He has us dialed. We need to move. Ramona was already rolling to her secondary position, a small depression 10 meters to the left that she had identified during her initial survey. The enemy sniper fired again, his round striking the rocks where she had been lying a moment before. He was good, very good, but she had faced skilled opponents before. She settled into the new position, acquiring the target through her scope. He was relocating too, moving with the fluid efficiency of someone who had done this many times. For a moment, their scopes aligned, and she found herself looking directly at another pair of eyes through the magnified optics. The enemy sniper was young, maybe 30, with dark features and a beard that suggested local origin. But his equipment and his movement spoke of training far beyond what local militants typically received. Wind shifting, Dante called from his position. Coming around to the southeast, 12 miles per hour now. Ramona adjusted, tracking the moving target, waiting for the moment when he would have to stop and shoot. That was the weakness of the sniper duel. Eventually, you had to hold still long enough to aim. He found his position and settled. She saw his rifle come up, saw the barrel orient toward her. They fired at almost the same instant. His round went wide, deflected by the shifting wind he had not fully accounted for. Hers did not. The enemy sniper crumpled, and the eastern ridge fell silent. Both enemy snipers neutralized, Ramona reported, her voice betraying none of the fear that had gripped her moments before. Alpha Team, you are clear to advance. Forsyth's response was clipped but professional. Alpha moving. Below, the Marines emerged from their concealment and began advancing toward the compound. Ramona shifted her scope to cover their approach, scanning for any new threats. The operation was proceeding according to plan. Then the compound's eastern wall exploded outward, and everything changed. Ramona saw the technical before she fully processed what had happened. The armed pickup truck roared through the breach in the wall, its mounted machine gun already spitting fire toward the advancing Marines. Behind it, militants were pouring out of the compound, dragging a stumbling figure in civilian clothes between them. Dr. Castellanos. They were moving the hostage. Alpha teams scattered, seeking cover from the murderous fire of the technical. Ramona heard Forsyth's voice on the radio, tight with controlled urgency. "We are pinned down. The technical has to go." She found a vehicle in her scope, tracking it as it maneuvered to maintain fire superiority. The gunner was exposed from the waist up, a clear target. But beyond the technical, through the shattered wall of the compound, she could see the militants forcing Castellanos into a second building. And in the window of that building, she could see a figure holding a weapon to the doctor's head. The shot on the technical gunner was achievable. 1,800 meters, but manageable. The problem was what came after. If she took out the gunner, the Marines could advance. But the militants would have time to execute the hostage before anyone could reach her. Ramona's hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. And for the first time since Yemen, she knew exactly what she needed to do. It was impossible. 3 targets at different distances, in different positions, with a window of less than 2 seconds before the hostage died. But impossible was just a word. And Ramona Okafor had not come this far to let words stop her. The technical's machine gun continued its deadly sweep across the valley floor, forcing Forsyth's Marines deeper into cover. Ramona could hear the chaos over the radio, fragmented voices calling out positions and casualties. 2 men were down, wounded but alive. The assault had stalled before it truly began, and every second that passed brought Dr. Castellanos closer to death. Dante was beside her, his spotting scope fixed on the compound. "Chief, I count 2 hostiles with the hostage. One has her by the arm, the other has a pistol to her head. They are moving her toward the east building. If they get her inside, we lose visual." Ramona processed the tactical situation with the cold clarity that came only in moments of extreme focus. The technical gunner was 1,847 meters away, positioned to slaughter anyone who moved from cover. The 2 militants with Castellanos were approximately 30 meters beyond that, visible through a shattered section of the compound wall. The geometry was a nightmare. One shot would eliminate the technical threat and free the Marines to advance. But in the time it took them to close the distance, the hostage would be dead. She needed to take out all 3 targets before anyone could react. 3 shots across nearly 1,900 meters, with different holdover calculations for each in a window of less than 2 seconds. "I need numbers," she said to Dante. He understood immediately, shifting his scope between the targets and calling out the data she would need. Technical gunner, 1,847 meters, angle 12 degrees downward. First hostile with the hostage, 1,877 meters, angle 14 degrees. Second hostile, 1,879 meters, same angle, 2 meters right of the first. Ramona ran the calculations in her head. The wind had shifted again, now coming from the southeast at roughly 12 miles per hour. At these distances, even a small error in wind calculation would push her rounds off target, and she would not have time to see where each shot landed before taking the next. She would have to trust her math and fire blind. "Phantom," Nystrom's voice came over the radio. "What is your assessment?" She keyed her microphone. "I can take the technical, but the moment I fire, they will execute the hostage." There was a pause. Then Nystrom asked the question she had been dreading. "Can you take all 3? The honest answer was that she did not know. No one had ever made a shot like this. 3 targets at extreme range, fired in sequence so rapidly that the 3rd target would not have time to react to the first 2 falling. It violated every principle of precision marksmanship she had ever been taught. But the alternative was watching Miriam Castellanos die while she did nothing. "I'm going to try," she said. Forsyth's voice cut into the channel, rough with skepticism and something else she could not identify. That is suicide math, Chief. No one makes 3 shots like that in sequence. You will miss, and the hostage dies anyway. Then she dies knowing someone tried, Ramona replied, which is more than she will get if I do nothing. The radio fell silent. Below, the technical continued its suppressive fire, and the militants continued dragging their hostage toward the building. She had maybe 30 seconds before they disappeared from view entirely. Dante reached over and gripped her arm. Chief, Ramona, look at me. She pulled back from her scope and met his eyes. I have been your spotter for 4 years, he said. I have watched you make shots that should have been impossible. I have seen you do things with a rifle that made me question the laws of physics. If anyone can do this, it is you. But I need to know that you are doing it for the right reasons. Not because of Yemen, not because of Krieger, because it is the right call. Ramona held his gaze. In her mind, she saw Krieger's face. She saw the child in Yemen who had caused her to hesitate. She saw every moment of doubt and self-recrimination that had haunted her for 3 years. And then she let all go. This is not about Yemen, she said. This is about a woman who is going to die in the next 30 seconds if I do not act. I am taking the shot because it is the only chance she has, and because I am the only one who can give it to her. Dante nodded once, then returned to his scope. Wind steady at 12 from the southeast. First target, technical gunner. Call it when you are ready. Ramona settled behind her rifle. The world narrowed to the scope, the targets, and the calculations that would determine whether 3 people lived or died in the next few seconds. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow to a steady rhythm. The tremor in her hands was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost supernatural. She found the technical gunner in her crosshairs. 1847 meters. Adjusted for wind, for elevation, for the Coriolis effect at this distance. Her finger rested on the trigger, applying pressure so gradually that the shot would come as a surprise even to her. The first round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. She was already moving, shifting her aim point 30 meters further, adjusting for the additional distance and the slightly different angle. The second target was still holding Castellanos by the arm, unaware that death was crossing the valley toward him. The second round followed the first by less than half a second. Her scope found the third target, the man with the pistol pressed to Castellanos' temple. He was starting to react now, some primitive instinct warning him that something was wrong. His head was turning, his eyes searching for the threat he could not see. The third round left the barrel 1.7 seconds after the first. Time seemed to stretch as Ramona watched through her scope. The technical gunner jerked backward, his hands releasing the machine gun as the round punched through his chest. Before his body began to fall, the first militant beside Castellanos crumpled, a red mist marking the passage of the bullet through his skull. The third militant had less than a quarter second to process what was happening. His finger tightened on the trigger of his pistol, an involuntary reaction to the chaos erupting around him. But the bullet that would have ended Miriam Castellanos' life never fired. Ramona's third round arrived first. The militant collapsed, and Castellanos stood frozen in the sudden silence, surrounded by the bodies of men who had been holding her captive a heartbeat before. 3 shots, 3 kills, 1.7 seconds. The radio erupted with voices. Forsyth was shouting orders, his Marines surging forward now that the technical was silenced. Nystrom was calling for status reports. Someone was saying something about what they had just witnessed, words that Ramona could not process through the roaring in her ears. Dante was staring at her, his expression caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. That was impossible, he said quietly. What you just did was physically impossible. Ramona pulled back from her scope, her hands beginning to shake now that the adrenaline was receding. Apparently not, she replied. Below, Forsyth's Marines reached Castellanos and formed a protective perimeter around her. The assault continued, clearing the remaining militants from the compound with brutal efficiency. But the battle was effectively over. The impossible shot had broken the enemy's defense and saved the hostage in a single devastating sequence. Phantom, Nystrom's voice came over the radio, and for the first time since she had known him, The Swedish commander sounded shaken. Confirm 3 targets neutralized with 3 rounds at 1,800 plus meters. Confirmed, Ramona said. Hostage is secure. There was a long pause. Then Nystrom said simply, outstanding. Ramona allowed herself one moment to close her eyes and breathe. Krieger's face appeared in her memory, but this time it was not an accusation. It was something that looked almost like peace. I did not hesitate, she whispered to the ghost of her fallen friend. This time, I did not hesitate. Then she opened her eyes and returned to her scope. The mission was not over yet. The compound was still not secure. Ramona swept her scope across the perimeter, tracking movement as Forsyth's Marines cleared building by building. The technical sat silent now. Its gunner slumped over the mounted weapon, but pockets of resistance remained. Sporadic gunfire echoed up from the valley as the remaining militants fought a desperate rearguard action. Dante called out targets as they appeared. 2 hostiles, north corner of the main building. Range 1,100. Ramona found them. 2 figures attempting to flank the Marine fire team advancing from the east. She put the first one down with a single round, and the second dove for cover before she could acquire him. He emerged 3 seconds later, sprinting for a doorway. Her second shot caught him mid-stride. Alpha team, north corner is clear, she reported over the radio. Copy that, Phantom. Forsyth's voice had lost its earlier edge of skepticism. He sounded like a man who had just watched something that fundamentally altered his understanding of what was possible. We are approaching the main structure. Hostage is secure with second squad. Ramona shifted her focus to the main building, watching through her scope as Marines stacked on the entrance and breached with practiced precision. Muzzle flashes flickered in the windows, followed by the muffled thump of grenades. Then silence. Building secure, Forsyth reported. We have 3 enemy Kia and 1 wounded. No friendly casualties in the breach. The wounded militant was dragged out into the morning light, his leg shattered by a round that had caught him trying to flee. Marines Zip tied his hands while a corpsman applied a tourniquet. He would survive to face interrogation. Ramona felt nothing at the sight. Mercy for the enemy was a luxury that came after the mission was complete. Nystrom's voice came over the command channel. All elements begin extraction. Helicopters are inbound. ETA 8 minutes. Rally at the primary LZ. Ramona began breaking down her position, collapsing her bipod, and securing her rifle for movement. Dante was already packing his spotting scope, his movements quick but controlled. They had done what they came to do. Dr. Castellanos was alive, the enemy was destroyed, and in less than 10 minutes they would be airborne and heading back to safety. Then Dante froze, his head cocked to one side. Chief, you hear that? Ramona listened. At first there was nothing but the distant shouts of Marines and the fading echo of gunfire. Then she caught it, a sound that did not belong, the low growl of an engine, coming from somewhere to the east. She brought her scope back up, scanning the ridgeline beyond the compound. Movement caught her eye, a vehicle emerging from a concealed position that the intelligence analyst had somehow missed. It was another technical, this one larger than the first, with what appeared to be a heavier weapon mounted in the bed. Contact east, she called into the radio. Second technical, range approximately 2,000 meters, bearing 0905. Forsyth's response was immediate. Can you take the shot? Ramona evaluated the target. The vehicle was moving fast across broken terrain, bouncing and weaving in a way that made a precision shot nearly impossible. The gunner in the back was hunched over his weapon, and as she watched, the barrel swung toward the Marines gathering at the extraction point. Negative. Target is mobile and at extreme range. I need him to stop. We do not have time for him to stop, Forsyth snapped. That weapon is going to be in range of the LZ in less than a minute. The technical continued its approach, eating up the distance with terrifying speed. Ramona tracked it through her scope, calculating angles and holdovers, searching for any shot that might work. But the math refused to cooperate. A moving target at 2,000 meters in a bouncing vehicle was not a shot. It was a prayer. Then the technical hit a rock and lurched sideways. For just a moment, less than a second, the vehicle slowed as the driver corrected. The gunner braced himself against the roll. Ramona fired. The round crossed 2,000 meters of open air in just over 3 seconds. By the time it arrived, the technical was moving again, accelerating toward the extraction point. But the gunner was no longer behind his weapon. He was tumbling out of the truck bed, his body limp and broken. The driver saw his gunner fall and panicked. He wrenched the wheel hard, sending the technical careening off the road and into a ravine. The vehicle rolled twice before coming to rest on its side, smoke pouring from the engine compartment. Second technical neutralized, Ramona reported. LZ is clear. The silence on the radio lasted for several seconds. Then Forsyth spoke, and his voice carried something she had never heard from him before. Something that sounded almost like respect. Copy that, Phantom. Outstanding shooting. The extraction helicopters arrived on schedule, their rotors kicking up clouds of dust as they settled onto the rocky ground. Marines loaded Dr. Castellanos into the first bird, surrounding her with a protective cordon as medics began initial assessment. She was dehydrated and showed signs of rough treatment, but she was alive. That was what mattered. Ramona and Dante made their way down from the Overwatch position, moving quickly through terrain that had seemed so treacherous in the darkness, but now appeared almost mundane in the morning light. By the time they reached the LZ, the first helicopter was already lifting off with the hostage aboard. Nystrom met them at the second bird, his normally stoic expression cracked by something that might have been a smile. That was the finest display of marksmanship I have ever witnessed, he said. 3 shots in under 2 seconds at 1,800 meters. And then that last shot on the moving technical. He shook his head. I do not have words. Ramona accepted the praise with a simple nod. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made her legs feel like they were filled with sand. She wanted nothing more than to close her eyes and sleep for a week. But there was one more thing she needed to do. Forsyth was supervising the loading of his Marines into the third helicopter. His movements were efficient, professional, the mockery and hostility temporarily set aside in favor of the practical demands of extraction. Ramona approached him, and for a moment, they simply stood facing each other while the rotors beat the air around them. Gunnery Sergeant, she said. Chief. His voice was neutral, carefully controlled. Your Marines performed well today. The breach was clean. The extraction was textbook. You should be proud of them. Forsyth studied her face, searching for mockery or condescension and finding neither. After a moment, he nodded. They are good men. He paused, and something shifted in his expression. That shot you took. The 3 targets. I have been in this business for 18 years. I have never seen anything like that. Ramona held his gaze. I was just doing my job, Gunnery Sergeant. Same as you. He seemed to want to say something more, but the helicopter crew chief was waving them aboard. The moment passed, and they climbed into the bird without further conversation. But as the helicopter lifted off and banked toward Camp Lemonnier, Ramona noticed that Forsyth was no longer looking at her with contempt. He was looking at her like she was a problem he could not solve. And for now, that was enough. The flight back to Camp Lemonnier took 47 minutes. Ramona spent most of it staring out the open door of the helicopter, watching the Somali landscape scroll past beneath them. The adrenaline had fully drained from her system now, leaving behind a hollow feeling that she recognized from previous operations. It was the come down, the moment when the body realized it was no longer in mortal danger and began demanding payment for the stress it had endured. Dante sat beside her, his eyes closed but his hand resting on her arm in a gesture of quiet solidarity. He had not spoken since they lifted off, but his presence was enough. They had been through hell together, and they had come out the other side. Words were not necessary. The base appeared on the horizon, a cluster of buildings and runways carved out of the African desert. As the helicopter began its descent, Ramona allowed herself to feel something she had not permitted in 3 years. Pride. Not arrogance, not boastfulness, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had done something extraordinary. She had faced her demons and won. The landing was smooth, and the task force began dispersing almost immediately. Marines headed for their barracks, SEALs for theirs, everyone seeking the basic comforts of water, food, and rest. Dr. Castellanos was whisked away to the medical facility for a full evaluation, surrounded by intelligence officers eager to debrief her on everything she had seen and heard during her captivity. Ramona was gathering her gear when Master Chief Achebe intercepted her on the tarmac. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made her pause. "Chief Okafor, a word if you have a moment." She followed him away from the noise of the flight line, into a quiet corner between two maintenance buildings. The morning sun was fully up now, and the heat was already becoming oppressive. Achebe seemed not to notice. "I heard what happened out there," he said. "The three-shot sequence. The moving technical at 2,000 meters. He shook his head slowly. "In 40 years of service, I have never heard of anything like it." Ramona said nothing. She was still processing the event herself, still trying to reconcile what she had done with what she had believed was possible. Achebe continued, "I also have news about the sabotage investigation. We identified the individual responsible, a supply clerk named Peterson. He had connections to an online group that opposes women in combat roles. Apparently, he saw your assignment to this task force as an opportunity to prove that female operators could not perform under pressure." Ramona absorbed this information. "Not Forsyth. No, not Forsyth." Achebe paused. "The gunnery sergeant has his prejudices, and he has made your life difficult. But he would never compromise a mission that put his own people at risk. His hatred is personal, not suicidal. What happens to Peterson? He is already in custody. He will face court-martial for sabotage of military equipment during a combat operation. Given the circumstances, he will likely spend the next several years in a military prison." Achebe's expression hardened. "He could have gotten people killed. He will answer for that." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Ramona had suspected Forsyth, had allowed his hostility to color her perception of the threat. She had been wrong. It was a reminder that prejudice could blind you to the truth, even when you were the one being targeted by it. "Your father would be proud of what you did today," Achebe said quietly. "I knew him, as I told you before. He was a man who believed that excellence was the only answer to those who doubted you. He would have seen your performance today as the ultimate vindication." Ramona felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had been carrying for longer than she could remember. "Thank you, Master Chief. That means more than you know." She found Dante in the team room, sprawled across a couch with a bottle of water balanced on his chest. He cracked one eye open as she entered. There she is, the woman who rewrote the laws of physics. He grinned, but there was genuine warmth behind the humor. "How are you holding up?" Ramona dropped into the chair across from him. "Still processing. It does not feel real yet." "It will." Dante sat up, his expression becoming more serious. "What you did out there, Chief? That was not just good shooting. That was something else entirely. I've been trying to find the words for it, and the best I can come up with is transcendent." She laughed, a short sound that surprised her. "Transcendent. That is a big word for a Louisiana swamp rat. I contain multitudes." He smiled, then let the expression fade. "I meant what I said before the shot. About who you are. You proved it today. Not to me. I already knew. But to everyone else who ever doubted you. And maybe to yourself." Ramona considered his words. For 3 years, she had carried the weight of Yemen like a stone around her neck. The hesitation, the death of Krieger, the endless second-guessing of a decision made in a fraction of a second. She had believed that one moment of failure defined her, that nothing she did afterward could ever erase it. But today, she had faced an impossible situation and made an impossible choice. 3 shots that should not have worked, that defied probability and physics, and everything she had been taught about the limits of her craft. And she had taken them without hesitation, without doubt, without the paralyzing fear that had haunted her since Yemen. Maybe Dante was right. Maybe she had finally proven something to herself. The door opened, and Staff Sergeant Brennan entered. She looked tired, her uniform still dusty from the operation, but she moved with purpose. Her eyes found Ramona immediately. Chief Okafor, I wanted to speak with you. Ramona rose from her chair. Staff Sergeant. Brennan stopped a few feet away, her posture formal, but her expression carrying something that had not been there before. I owe you an apology. I judged you based on rumors and assumptions. I let my own insecurities about being a woman in this world color my perception of you. That was wrong. The admission hung in the air between them. Ramona had not expected this, had not anticipated that Brennan would be capable of acknowledging her mistakes so directly. I watched what you did through my scope today, Brennan continued. The 3 shots. I have been a designated marksman for 6 years. I could not have made one of those shots, let alone all 3 in sequence. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. You are not trying to prove anything. You're just that good, and I should have seen it from the beginning. Ramona extended her hand. We are both fighting the same battles, Staff Sergeant, just on different fronts. There is no need for us to fight each other too. Brennan took the hand and shook it firmly. Agreed. She allowed herself a small smile. Maybe next time we can watch each other's backs instead of doubting each other. I would like that. Brennan nodded once and left, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Dante watched her go, then turned to Ramona with raised eyebrows. Did that just happen? Did the Ice Queen just apologize and offer friendship? Ramona settled back in her chair, feeling lighter than she had in years. People can surprise you, even the ones you think you have figured out. Through the window, she could see the sun climbing higher over Camp Lemonnier. The day was still young, and there was still one conversation she needed to have. One ghost she needed to lay to rest. But for now, she allowed herself to simply sit and breathe and feel the unfamiliar sensation of peace. The evening briefing was a formality, a structured recounting of events that everyone in the room had already lived through. Colonel Hadwick walked through the operation phase by phase, acknowledging successes and noting areas for improvement with the dispassionate efficiency of a career officer. But beneath the professional veneer, there was something else. A current of amazement that rippled through the assembled operators whenever the conversation turned to the Overwatch element's performance. Chief Okafor's engagement of the 3 hostile targets at the compound represents an extraordinary demonstration of precision marksmanship under combat conditions, Hadwick said, reading from notes that someone on his staff had prepared. 3 confirmed kills at ranges between 1,847 and 1,879 meters, executed in a sequence lasting approximately 1.7 seconds. This engagement directly enabled the successful extraction of the hostage and prevented what would likely have been significant friendly casualties. Ramona sat in the back of the room, her face carefully neutral. She could feel eyes on her, some admiring, some skeptical, a few that she could not read at all. Forsyth was near the front, his posture rigid, his expression locked in the same unreadable mask he had worn since they returned to base. The briefing concluded with commendations for the entire task force and a reminder that detailed after-action reports would be due within 72 hours. As the room began to empty, Ramona slipped out a side door, seeking the relative quiet of the corridor beyond. She did not get far before a voice stopped her. Chief Okafor. She turned to find Forsyth standing a few meters away, his Marines continuing past him toward the exit. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 3 days of hostility and 1 morning of impossible events. Gunnery Sergeant, Ramona said finally. Forsyth took a step closer, then stopped, as if uncertain how to proceed. His jaw worked for a moment before he spoke. I need to say something to you, and I need you to hear it without interrupting. Ramona nodded once. He drew a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, rougher, stripped of the swagger that had characterized their every previous interaction. 3 years ago, my sister was killed in a training accident. Her name was Elena. She was 24 years old, and she was the best person I have ever known. Ramona remained silent, honoring his request. The official report said it was equipment failure combined with environmental factors. But I knew the real reason. The woman driving the vehicle that rolled on her had no business being there. She had been pushed through training she was not ready for, given a position she had not earned, all because someone in Washington decided that the numbers mattered more than the standards. Forsyth's voice cracked slightly, then hardened again. Elena died because someone wanted to make a political point, and I have spent every day since then making sure that would never happen again. He met Ramona's eyes directly. When I saw you, I saw every woman who had ever been given something she did not earn. Every quota fill, every diversity hire, every political appointment that put unqualified people in positions where lives depended on their competence. I hated you before I ever knew you, because I had already decided what you represented. Ramona waited. I was wrong. Forsyth spoke the words like they cost him something, like each syllable was being dragged from somewhere deep and painful. What you did today was not the work of someone who was given anything. That was skill. That was training. That was the kind of excellence that cannot be faked or handed out. He paused. I have been in combat for 18 years. I have served with some of the finest warriors this country has ever produced, and I have never seen anyone do what you did today. The admission hung in the air between them. Ramona could see what it had cost him, could see the internal struggle still playing out behind his eyes. He had built his entire worldview around a narrative of resentment and loss, and she had just demolished it with 3 pulls of a trigger. I am sorry about Elena, she said quietly. Losing someone you love, especially in a way that feels preventable, is one of the worst things a person can experience. I understand why you needed someone to blame. Forsyth's expression flickered, surprise breaking through the careful control. You do. 3 years ago, I lost a teammate in Yemen. His name was Krieger. He died because I hesitated on a shot. 1 second of doubt, and he paid for it with his life. Ramona held his gaze. I have spent every day since then wondering if I deserved to wear this uniform. Wondering if the people who doubted me were right. Wondering if I would freeze again when it mattered. And today I found out. She let the words settle. I'm not responsible for whoever hurt your sister, Gunnery Sergeant. I'm not responsible for policies I did not make or decisions I did not influence. I'm only responsible for my own performance. And I have earned my place here, the same way you earned yours. Through blood and sweat and sacrifice. Forsyth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer, perhaps. Or simply tired. I do not know how to let go of this. Elena deserved better than what she got. And holding on to the anger is the only way I know how to honor her memory. Ramona considered her response carefully. Anger is not honor. Anger is just pain looking for a target. You want to honor Elena? Be the kind of leader she would have been proud to serve under. Judge people by their performance, not by your assumptions about them. That is how you keep her memory alive. The silence that followed was different from before. Less hostile, more contemplative. Forsyth seemed to be wrestling with something internal, some fundamental shift in his understanding of the world and his place in it. Finally, he nodded. It was a small gesture, barely perceptible, but it carried weight. I cannot promise anything, he said. 18 years of thinking one way does not change overnight. But I can promise to try. That is all anyone can ask. He extended his hand. It was not a gesture of friendship, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement, a recognition that the ground between them had shifted. Ramona took his hand and shook it. The grip was firm, professional, carrying none of the posturing or dominance games that often characterize such exchanges between operators. Just 2 warriors who had found an unexpected common ground. Forsyth released her hand and stepped back. For what it is worth, he said, I hope you take that instructor position at Warcom. The next generation of snipers could learn a lot from you. Ramona blinked, surprised. You know about that? Word travels. He allowed himself the ghost of a smile. You would be wasted behind a desk. But training the people who will carry this fight forward, that is a legacy worth building. He turned and walked away, leaving Ramona alone in the corridor with her thoughts. Through the window, she could see the sun setting over Camp Lemonnier, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful in a stark and unforgiving way, like the desert itself. She thought about Krieger, about Elena, about all the ghosts that haunted the people who chose this life. Some wounds never healed completely. Some losses never stopped hurting. But that did not mean you had to let them define you. She pulled out her phone and composed a message to her commanding officer at Workham. She had a decision to make, and for the first time in 3 years, she knew exactly what she wanted. The reply came within minutes. The position was still available. They would be honored to have her. Ramona smiled and slipped the phone back into her pocket. One chapter of her life was ending. Another was about to begin. The medical facility at Camp Lemonnier was quiet in the early morning hours, the hallways empty except for the occasional nurse moving between stations. Ramona had been told that Dr. Castellanos was recovering well, that her injuries were minor and her spirits surprisingly strong for someone who had spent 11 days in captivity. But she had not come to check on the doctor's physical condition. She found Castellanos sitting up in bed, reading something on a tablet that a staff member had provided. The epidemiologist looked up as Ramona entered, and recognition flickered across her features. "You are the sniper," Castellanos said. "The one who made those shots." Ramona nodded. "Chief Petty Officer Okafor. I wanted to see how you were doing." Castellanos set the tablet aside and studied her visitor with the careful attention of a scientist examining a new specimen. "I have been trying to understand what happened out there. The men who were holding me, one moment they were dragging me toward that building, and the next moment they were simply gone. All 3 of them, in less time than it takes to blink." "It happened fast," Ramona acknowledged. The doctor shook her head slowly. "I have a PhD in molecular biology. I understand probability and physics better than most people. What you did should not have been possible. The distances involved, the timing, the precision required." She paused. "How did you do it?" Ramona considered the question. She had been asking herself the same thing since the moment she pulled the trigger. The technical answer involved years of training, thousands of hours of practice, an intuitive understanding of ballistics that had become second nature. But that was not really what Castellanos was asking. "I stopped thinking about whether I could," Ramona said finally. "I started thinking about why I had to." Castellanos was quiet for a moment, absorbing the response. Then she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her tired features. "I spent my career studying diseases that kill thousands of people, looking for solutions that seem impossible until someone finds them. What you just described, that is the same thing. The moment when you stop being limited by what you think is possible and start being driven by what is necessary." Ramona had not expected to find common ground with the scientist, but she recognized the truth in Castellanos' words. They were different people from different worlds, but they had both dedicated their lives to doing things that others said could not be done. "What will you do now?" Ramona asked. "After you are debriefed and clear to leave, go back to work." Castellanos' voice carried a quiet determination. "The research I was conducting when they took me, it is too important to abandon. There are people dying who do not have to die, and I am close to finding answers that could save them." She met Ramona's eyes. "You risked your life to save mine. The least I can do is make sure that sacrifice was worth something." The 2 women sat in comfortable silence for a moment, connected by an understanding that transcended their different backgrounds. Then Castellanos reached out and took Ramona's hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Ramona squeezed her hand gently. "Stay safe out there, doctor." She left the medical facility as the sun was beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the base. The day was already warming, the African heat building toward its midday intensity. But Ramona barely noticed. Her mind was occupied with the conversation she had just had and the one she still needed to have. She found Nystrom in the team room, reviewing after-action reports on his laptop. He looked up as she entered, his expression shifting from concentration to curiosity. "Chief, I did not expect to see you awake this early." "Could not sleep," Ramona admitted. "Too much to process." Nystrom closed his laptop and gestured to the chair across from him. "Seat. Talk to me." She settled into the chair, trying to organize her thoughts into coherent words. The last 24 hours had been a whirlwind of action, emotion, and revelation. She had killed enemy combatants, saved a hostage, made peace with a man who had hated her, and decided to change the entire trajectory of her career. It was a lot to absorb. I accepted the Warcom position, she said, training the next generation of snipers. Nystrom nodded slowly. I thought you might. After today, they would be fools not to want you, and you would be a fool not to take it. You are not disappointed? He smiled, a rare expression that softened his normally stern features. I am proud. You have been carrying the weight of Yemen for 3 years. Today you finally put it down. And now you are ready to do something even more important than pulling triggers yourself. What is that? Teaching others how to do it. Nystrom leaned forward, his voice taking on an intensity that Ramona had rarely heard from him. The shots you took today, they will save 1 life, maybe a few more over the course of the operation. But the snipers you train, they will save hundreds, thousands. Your legacy will not be measured in kills. It will be measured in the lives that continue because of what you taught the people who come after you. Ramona had not thought about it that way. She had been so focused on her own redemption, her own need to prove that Yemen did not define her, that she had not considered the broader impact of her decision. There is something else, she said. Forsyth, we talked last night. Nystrom raised an eyebrow. And? He apologized. Not fully, not completely, but he acknowledged that he was wrong about me. She paused, remembering the pain in Forsyth's eyes when he spoke about Elena. He has his own ghosts, his own reasons for being the way he is. It does not excuse what he did, but it helps me understand it. Understanding is the first step toward forgiveness, Nystrom observed. And forgiveness is the first step toward peace. I'm not sure I am ready to forgive him yet. You do not have to be. Nystrom rose from his chair and crossed to the window, looking out at the base coming to life in the morning light. Forgiveness is not a destination. It is a journey. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it never fully arrives. But the fact that you are willing to try, that you can see him as a human being instead of just an obstacle, that is progress. Ramona joined him at the window. The sun was fully up now, bathing Camp Lemonnier in golden light. Marines and SEALs were emerging from their barracks, beginning the routines that would fill another day. Life continuing, despite everything that had happened. When do you leave? Nystrom asked. End of the week, probably. There is paperwork, debriefings, the usual bureaucratic maze. But Warcom wants me to start as soon as possible. Then we should make the most of the time we have left. Nystrom turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that might have been sadness, or might have been pride. You have been the best sniper I have ever worked with, Ramona. It has been an honor to serve alongside you. The honor has been mine, sir. They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 warriors who had shared more than words could express. The bond forged in combat was different from any other human connection, deeper in some ways, more fragile in others. They both knew that this chapter of their lives was ending, that their paths would diverge in ways that could not be predicted. But for now, in this moment, they were simply comrades watching the sun rise over a foreign land, grateful to be alive and ready for whatever came next. The celebration that evening was not officially sanctioned, but no one seemed inclined to shut it down. Someone had procured a case of non-alcoholic beer from the base exchange, and the Joint Task Force had commandeered a corner of the recreation building for what was being called a mission debrief, but was clearly something more. Marines and SEALs mingled in a way they had not before the operation. The barriers of branch rivalry temporarily dissolved by shared experience. Ramona arrived late, having spent the afternoon completing paperwork and coordinating her transfer to Warcom. The room fell momentarily quiet when she entered, conversations pausing as heads turned in her direction. Then Dante raised his bottle and shouted across the room. There she is, Phantom herself, the woman who made God check his math. Laughter rippled through the gathering, and the tension broke. Someone pressed a bottle into Ramona's hand, and she found herself pulled into the center of the celebration, surrounded by people who had witnessed something extraordinary and wanted to share in the memory of it. Brennan appeared at her elbow, her earlier coldness completely absent. I have been telling everyone about the shot sequence. 3 targets, under 2 seconds, at nearly 1,900 meters. She shook her head. I still cannot believe I watched it happen. I'm having trouble believing it myself, Ramona admitted. A young Marine approached, one of the privates who had been part of the assault team. He looked nervous, clearly uncertain whether he was allowed to speak directly to someone of Ramona's reputation. Chief Okafor, I just wanted to say thank you. That technical would have torn us apart if you had not taken out the gunner. You saved my life. Ramona looked at him, seeing the youth in his face, the mixture of gratitude and awe in his eyes. He could not have been more than 20 years old, barely started on a career that would take him to places he could not yet imagine. I was just doing my job, private. Same as you. The Marine nodded, but his expression suggested he did not entirely believe her. He retreated back into the crowd, and Ramona watched him go with a strange feeling in her chest. That young man would tell the story of this operation for the rest of his life. He would tell his children and grandchildren about the day a Navy SEAL sniper made 3 impossible shots and saved his entire squad. The thought was simultaneously humbling and terrifying. Dante found her a few minutes later, pulling her aside to a quieter corner of the room. You doing okay? You have that look. What look? The one you get when you're thinking too hard about something. He studied her face with the familiarity of years of partnership. Talk to me. Ramona took a moment to gather her thoughts. It is strange. For 3 years, all I wanted was to prove that Yemen did not define me, to show everyone, including myself, that I was still capable of performing when it mattered. And now that I have done it, I do not know what to do with the feeling. The feeling of success? The feeling of being seen. She gestured at the room around them, at the Marines and SEALs who kept glancing in her direction, at the young private who had thanked her for his life. For so long, I was the woman who froze in Yemen, the quota fill, the experiment. Now suddenly I am something else, and I do not know how to be that person yet. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, the expression carrying warmth and understanding. You do not have to figure it out tonight. You do not have to figure out this week or this month. He put his hand on her shoulder. You're the same person you were before the operation. The only thing that changed is that other people can finally see what I've always seen. And what is that? The best damn sniper I have ever worked with. And more importantly, a good person who cares about doing the right thing. He squeezed her shoulder. The rest is just details. Across the room, Forsyth was standing with his Marines, listening to one of them recount some aspect of the operation with animated gestures. He caught Ramona's eye, and for a moment their gazes held. Then he raised his bottle in her direction, a small gesture of acknowledgement that would have been unthinkable 48 hours earlier. Ramona returned the gesture, and something passed between them. Not friendship, not yet, perhaps not ever, but respect, recognition, the understanding that they had both been changed by what happened, and that the future would be different because of it. The evening wound down gradually, people drifting away in ones and twos as exhaustion finally overcame the desire to celebrate. Ramona stayed until nearly the end, talking with people she had barely known before the operation and discovering connections she had not expected to find. Brennan told her about her own struggles as a woman in the Marines, the constant pressure to prove herself, the loneliness of being judged by different standards than her male counterparts. They exchanged contact information and promises to stay in touch. When she finally left the recreation building, the night air was cool against her skin. The stars over Djibouti were brilliant, unpolluted by city lights, stretching across the sky in patterns that humans had been reading for thousands of years. Ramona stood for a moment, just breathing, feeling the weight of the day settle into something manageable. Her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from her mother, who had somehow heard about the operation through the military family grapevine that moved faster than any official communication channel. The message was simple. Your father would be so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. Come home safe. Ramona read the words 3 times, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Her father had died 6 years ago, a heart attack that had taken him before he could see her complete SEAL training, before he could witness everything she had become. But in that moment, standing under the African stars, she felt his presence as surely as if he were standing beside her. I did it, Dad, she whispered to the darkness. I finally did it. The stars offered no response, but she did not need one. Some conversations happened in the heart, in the space between memory and hope. Her father knew. Somehow, wherever he was, he knew. She walked back to her quarters slowly, savoring the quiet and the cool air and the strange peace that had settled over her. Tomorrow would bring more paperwork, more debriefings, more preparations for the transition to Warkham. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply be present in the moment. For the first time in 3 years, Ramona Okafor slept without dreams of Yemen. The morning of her departure arrived with the kind of clarity that seemed appropriate for new beginnings. Ramona stood on the firing range one last time, watching the sun rise over Camp Lemonnier, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Her bags were packed, her paperwork complete, her transportation to the airfield scheduled for 0900. But she had wanted one more moment here, in the place where everything had changed. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. She did not turn, recognizing the gate before the person spoke. Figured I would find you here, Dante said, coming to stand beside her. You always did like watching the sun come up. Old habit. Ramona smiled. My father used to wake me up early when I was a kid. He said the best part of the day was the part most people slept through. Smart man. He was. She paused, feeling the familiar ache of loss that had softened over the years but never fully disappeared. I wish he could have seen yesterday, seen what we accomplished. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he said, maybe he did, in whatever way that works. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who had shared more than words could capture. For years of partnership, of trusting each other with their lives, of building the kind of bond that only existed between those who had faced death together and survived. It was ending now, at least in its current form, and they both knew it. I put in for a transfer, Dante said finally. To Warkham. Figured if you're going to be training the next generation of snipers, you might need a spotter who knows how you think. Ramona turned to look at him, surprised. You did not have to do that. I know. He grinned, the expression carrying all the warmth and loyalty that had defined their partnership. But someone has to keep you humble. Cannot have you telling those recruits you did everything by yourself. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I would never. The sound of an engine interrupted them, a vehicle approaching from the main part of the base. Ramona recognized it as the transport that would take her to the airfield. Her ride was here. The moment of departure had arrived. But before she could move toward it, another figure appeared on the range. A young woman in marine utilities, her face unfamiliar, her posture suggesting uncertainty. She approached hesitantly, stopping a few meters away. Chief Okafor, I'm sorry to bother you. I heard you were leaving today, and I wanted to catch you before you went. Ramona studied the young Marine. She could not have been more than 22, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that held a mixture of determination and doubt. Do I know you? No, ma'am. My name is Private First Class Lucia Vega. I am assigned to the support battalion here. The young woman hesitated. I heard what you did on the operation. Everyone has been talking about it. The 3 shots, the technical, all of it. Ramona waited, sensing there was more. I want to be a sniper, Vega continued, the words coming faster now. I have wanted it since I was 16 years old, since my brother came home from Afghanistan and told me about the Marines who save his unit. But everyone keeps telling me it is not possible. That women cannot do what you do. That I should focus on something more realistic. She met Ramona's eyes directly. I do not want to be realistic. I want to be exceptional. The words hit Ramona with unexpected force. She saw herself in this young woman, saw the same hunger and determination that had driven her own journey, the same refusal to accept limitations that others tried to impose. She walked closer to Vega, studying her with the assessing eye of someone who had spent years evaluating potential. What is your current qualification? Expert on the M4. Sharpshooter on the M16. I have been practicing with the M40 when I can get range time, but it is hard to find instructors willing to work with me. Ramona nodded slowly. Being a sniper is not about the rifle. It is about discipline, patience, and the ability to perform under pressure that would break most people. It is about making decisions in fractions of seconds that will haunt you for the rest of your life if you get them wrong. She paused. Are you prepared for that? Yes, ma'am. Vega's voice did not waver. I am prepared to do whatever it takes. Ramona reached into her pocket and pulled out a card. It was simple, just her name and contact information at Workham. She handed it to Vega. I am transferring to the sniper training program. When you're ready to take the next step, contact me. I will make sure you get a fair evaluation. Vega stared at the card like it was made of gold. Thank you, Chief. I will not let you down. Do not thank me yet. Ramona allowed herself a small smile. The training is going to be the hardest thing you have ever done. But if you have what it takes, I will help you find it. The young Marine nodded, clutching the card to her chest, then turned and walked away with a stride that seemed more confident than before. Ramona watched her go, feeling something shift inside her. This was why the Workham position mattered. Not for her own redemption, but for all the Lucia Vegas who would come after her. All the young women who had been told to go play with dolls instead of following their dreams. Dante appeared beside her again. That was a good thing you just did. It felt right. Ramona took a deep breath. Ready to go? They walked together toward the waiting vehicle, leaving the firing range behind. The base was fully awake now. Personnel moving between buildings, vehicles rumbling along the roads, the machinery of military life continuing its endless cycle. Ramona took one last look around, committing the moment to memory. Nystrom was waiting at the vehicle, along with Brennan and a few others who had come to see her off. There were handshakes and brief embraces, promises to stay in touch, the awkward rituals of farewell that never quite captured what people actually felt. Forsyth was there too, standing slightly apart from the group. When the others had finished, he stepped forward. Chief Okafor. His voice was formal, but his eyes held something that had not been there a week ago. It has been an experience serving with you. Likewise, Gunnery Sergeant. Ramona extended her hand. Take care of yourself, and take care of your Marines. He shook her hand firmly. I will, and for what is worth, I hope you train 100 snipers who are half as good as you. The world could use them. It was not an apology. It was not forgiveness, but it was something, a bridge built across a gap that had seemed uncrossable. Ramona accepted it for what it was. She climbed into the vehicle, Dante settling in beside her. As they pulled away from the group, she turned to look back through the rear window. The figures grew smaller, then disappeared as the vehicle rounded a corner. The airfield was 10 minutes away. The flight to the United States would take nearly a day with all the connections. And after that, a new chapter, new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. Ramona leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. The photograph of Krieger was still in her pocket, but its weight felt different now. Not a burden, but a reminder of what she had lost, what she had learned, and what she still had to give. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite part. Tell us about a time when someone underestimated you, or share if you have ever witnessed someone prove their doubters wrong. Your stories matter just as much as the ones we tell. The vehicle reached the airfield, and Ramona Okafor stepped out into the sunlight, ready for whatever came next. Behind her, the desert stretched to the horizon. Ahead of her, the future waited. She had made the impossible shot. Now, it was time to teach others how to do the same.